My name is Elizabeth Sump, and I'm just going to warm up for your main attraction here in a minute, who's going to be JeShaune Jackson. But I have had the honor and privilege of addressing these groups here with what used to be the Science of Entrepreneurial Engagement program with John Klipfel since 2009. And so this is my 5th year doing this. And in 2009, I also had the pleasure of meeting JeShaune Jackson for the first time when he came in as one of my interns when I was running the Clinical Tissue Engineering Center at the Cleveland Clinic. So this year, Mr. Klipfel came back to me and said, we'd really love you to come back and talk to this program again. And I said, John, I've been doing healthcare policy now for almost 2 years. I don't do science for a living anymore, and it's easy to get stale. And as fascinating as it is, my guess is your students do not want to hear about Medicaid expansion policy. Sometimes I don't even want to hear about Medicaid expansion policy. So, as an educator and a mentor, sometimes the greatest pleasure you can have is to be able to watch one of your students start to outstrip your own accomplishments and start to know a lot more about your subject matter than you do yourself. And hopefully JeShaune isn't going to turn into Darth Vader and kill me anytime soon, but he really is becoming the master. JeShaune grew up right here in the Cleveland area, graduated from Bedford High School. When I first met him in 2009, he was a first-year student in the STEP program at Case. And I said, what do you want to do? And we had this kind of long discussion where we kind of went everywhere from I want to be president to, I want to be a physician's assistant. And I think he's kind of messed around with a little bit of all of that in between. So I just want to, with enormous pleasure, introduce you to JeShaune Jackson, who's going to talk to you about what's going on at the Cleveland Clinic Innovations.
Don't believe none of what she says. She just says it because I'm in here. You should hear what she says around my back. All right. But basically, my name is JeShaune Jackson, as Beth mentioned, and I'm also president and founder of BioComm and BioComm Consulting. She mentioned I work in Cleveland Clinic's Innovations Department, but that's not why we're here today. We're here to talk about Believe in Ohio, but I added on Believe in Yourself because that's 20 times even more important. So first, we'll start off with just talking about what's going on in Ohio, but more specifically, what's going on in my hometown, Cleveland, Ohio. So Ron alluded to a fact earlier that some of you may not know, but it's a fun fact. Many of you may be familiar with Euclid Avenue. It's called Millionaires Row for a reason. Back in the mid-1900s, Cleveland, Ohio had the highest concentration of millionaires. Not just the highest, it had half of the population of the millionaires in the United States were concentrated right here in Cleveland, Ohio. It's also called the medical capital of the world for one specific reason. Actually, many specific reasons, but primarily with healthcare, we have 3 titans here. So we have Case Western Reserve University, which is ranked in the top 15 biomedical engineering programs in the U.S. and attracts about $500 million in grant funding each year. Cleveland Clinic, 4th best hospital out of the 5,000 they survey each year, and #1 in cardiovascular worldwide. As well as University Hospital, which is ranked 2nd in neonatal care with the university's Rainbow Babies and Children's Hospital. So where I work at, this is our innovations building. Cleveland Clinic back in 2000 spun off an innovations arm called Cleveland Clinic Innovations. Very creative name, I know, but we actually ventured out. So we're the venture group of Cleveland Clinic, and what we do is we package the research that we have developed at Cleveland Clinic for the market. So I specifically work with the 5-member team of the 75 employees we do have housed right in this building, and I primarily work with spinning off new companies based on the technologies that we do have. So first, I'll start off with my thesis. I don't want to confuse you with all this crazy mumbo jumbo that my boss probably will present to you, but basically my thesis is a bone enhancement device using stem cell therapy. So what is a stem cell? Let's start with that first. This is what a stem cell looks like. Not exactly, but close enough. Has an S on its chest. Stem cell starts with the S. But stem cells are actually just as powerful as Superman. So this is what a stem cell actually is. So a stem cell, unlike normal cells divide typically into half when they grow, but they divide in half producing 2 identical stem cells, producing 2 identical cells. However, a stem cell has 2 choices. It can either divide in one half and create another stem cell, which is called self-renewal, or it can produce another cell which goes on to become a mature cell through several different pathways. And this is involved by 2 different factors. One is environmental factors such as pH, temperature, some of these things that can actually influence that cell, which is a stem cell, to become like a bone cell or a heart cell or something like that. The other is specific cytokines and proteins that the cells secrete to encourage that cell to become something else. So, quick question. If I take a bone cell and I feed it a lot of sugar, guess what that bone cell becomes? A fat cell. So ironic enough, it's not just the genetic program, it's also what influence we have on these cells as well. So here's an example. So the side so you guys see. This is a stem cell. A stem cell divides into two different with replicated DNA within each of those. And then one goes on to be a specialized blood cell through a series of different pathways. The other one goes back to just produce more stem cells. Here's 4 primary categories that we get from stem cells. We get organs, which are solid organs in your body, like kidney or liver or something like that. The other one is blood cells, which are white blood cells, red blood cells. They can also go on to produce musculoskeletal cells, which are anything that has to do with bone, muscle, tissue in that sector. And then finally, nervous tissue, which factors your nervous system as well as your brain. However, in the absence of some of these cytokines and environmental factors, the stem cells kind of just grow out of control, like something we know. So when it grows out of control, we call that cancer. I'm not calling Miley Cyrus cancer, but she grows out of control. You guys may love her. She's probably misunderstood, but so are stem cells. So stem cells are misunderstood as well, and that's why we continuously research these cells so we can understand them better. Oh, that's somebody else that grew out of control too. But moving on, back to my thesis. This procedure that we came up with actually starts with taking a needle, you take an aspiration from someone's hip. So you dig into their bone marrow and you pull out just the liquid. So that liquid is actually composed of stem cells, red blood cells, white blood cells, bone fragments, some other stuff. And then what you're left with is, going to the left, is this aspirate over here. So this is a bone marrow aspirate. And what's in there is these very rare cells, which are called stem cells, that go on to produce only bone and bone cells that support bone. So the red blood cells we don't want, the white blood cells we don't want, we want the stem cells. So what you see right here on the right is a allograft bone. It looks like grits, I know, but if you take bone, you take the cells out of it and you take the DNA out of it so that the body doesn't reject it, what you're left with is this kind of porous, chalky material, which has all these holes in it, and when you pass the bone marrow through it, those very rare stem cells that I mentioned actually get stuck in those pores and naturally adhere to the bone. So what you're left with is this. It's a enriched allograft bone that we can use to help bone healing. Something you guys may be a little bit more familiar with is putty. You can think of Play-Doh. So it's like a very rich Play-Doh, and you can use that to help heal bone. So these are the tools we use in the operating room. Not exactly, but close to it. If you can imagine this, all metal and costing about $15,000 more than what you see up there. Not the chicken. But so you can use that putty that I mentioned to actually heal malunions, which are very severely fractured bone. When a bone breaks and is very severely fractured, it's not going to heal on its own. Or if you have a non-union, which is here, as you can see, is when the bone doesn't naturally grow back into each other. So what we use this putty to kind of just pack in here, and then the stem cells naturally fuse the bones back together. This device was sold on the market by Johnson & Johnson. We licensed it out to them, and we sold about 40,000 units and treated about 50,000 patients. So it was actually life-saving. It made the clinic a lot of money. That's why I love me over there. And then this device was packaged and it was called Select. So back to innovations. As I mentioned, I work in the innovations group. And what we do is we manage about 66 portfolio companies. So these companies can range from Juventus, which is a cellular therapeutic, to Explorus, which is an electronic healthcare medical records company, all the way to catheters. We have so many companies that we manage now, you have to expand to a broad depth. But I'm going to use 2 examples. One of those examples is Juventus. Juventus Therapeutics uses, we can go back to the stem cell. Stem cells, say we're using stem cells that's in your bone marrow. When anything in your body, if you get a cut, a burn, anything like that, what happens is those local cells at the injury site emit this signal saying, hey, I'm injured, we need somebody to come help us out and repair us. So those stem cells kind of go to that. That factor is it's a protein called SDF1. So Juventus uses SDF1 to enhance it, and they isolate the protein and inject it into the heart of patients who've just had a heart attack. Naturally, your body emits this signal, but it only emits it for about 3 days. If you have a heart attack, which is a severely damage of your heart, you need that in your system about 3 weeks. So they inject it right here into the heart through a catheter, and what they noticed was that it actually healed some of those heart attack patients when they came back using the stem cells of their natural body. Another really cool technology we're working with is the IBM Watson. I don't know if anyone in here is familiar with it, but it's a supercomputer artificial intelligence developed by IBM. And we're pairing it to use it for a medical application. So IBM Watson was featured on Jeopardy. It's a supercomputer. They just wanted to test it out, see if you could talk to it like as if it was a artificial intelligence. And it did pretty well, and some people were pretty disappointed and felt inferior to the technology. So we're using this because this technology can actually access a database which we can't comprehend ourselves, which is the internet. So it can use pictures, medical records, medical research, anything like that, and it can actually come back and present a diagnosis if you were to come present yourself to this computer. So we brought it into our Innovation Summit 2 years ago, and we paired up against some of our top surgeons. When I say top, I mean like one of the chairmans, #1 cardio surgeon in the world. We use them to pair it up against, and it just did phenomenal. So these surgeons, way smarter than I am, but they still didn't compare to Watson. So let's talk about why some of these technologies don't make it to the market. This is what happens when business meets science. The business people don't understand the science people don't understand the business, and they're just speaking in different terms to the point where they get about as enthusiastic as shaking a dead fish when they're talking to each other. Why? Because scientists, as I said, they have no idea about the business side. When I came in first and I met Beth, we were co-directing this Center of Tissue Engineering, and it was us, Mayo Clinic, Stanford, Harvard, all these big name schools, and me, I was this, 22-year-old kid at the time, and I had to tell one of the top researchers at Harvard that she needed to file a patent for her technology before she could sell it. For business, this is like ground rule #1. She understands science better than anyone in this room, but she just didn't understand the business side of it. So when I created BioComm, what we do is we kind of help bridge that gap between science and business and bring everyone together. So BioComm is a student organization we have at Case Western primarily. And what we do is we use students from our medical school, our law school, our business school, and our biomedical engineering. And we write business plans for shelf biomedical research developed on our campus. And what we do is we give students the experience of speaking with medical students can talk to law students so you can understand about patents. Biomedical engineers can talk to medical students. You just understand it. You get to speak the language right now. It's not like we have to wait several years till we actually get our real job. We can actually get a real experience with it while we're still in school. And we got a little bit of success from it. This was, if it goes, a competition we won from Johnson & Johnson. It was us. We got to compete in the semifinals with like Harvard, Cornell, all these other big name schools. And it was cool just to bring this back to Case, just to prove that Cleveland's doing very innovative things, and that this is just some of the stuff we're doing as students. We're not waiting till we go out. We literally did this as students right now, and we got the support of all of our deans on school. So what has Cleveland done right? Obviously not our sports. But Cleveland has developed an entrepreneurial ecosystem that supports entrepreneurship in a very powerful way. So these are some of the statistics from 2007 to 2011, which is the major duration of a crisis in which Cleveland actually thrived. So we produced more than 200 startup companies. As you can see, 83 of those startup companies, or 40%, were actually healthcare. Healthcare can be expanded out to biopharmaceuticals, healthcare IT, and medical devices. This is the money that we attracted. So we attracted over $1 billion into Cleveland-based startups over this same 4-year period, which I mentioned again was actually during a recession. That just shows that what we're doing here in Cleveland is actually something of value. And I'm actually teaching an international online course. I'm going to Europe for 2 weeks in, 3 weeks? And I'm going to for a fellowship on international entrepreneurship, and they want to do a case study based off of Cleveland, not based off of like the Silicon Valleys or the Californias, because they want to know what has Cleveland done to really produce some of these statistics. As you can see, 61% of that has been within healthcare, or a little over $500 million. So just to kind of wrap up, I just want to tell you guys a story about life. This is a game you know you probably have seen, But myself, as Beth mentioned, I was born and raised in Cleveland. Went to Bedford High School. When I graduated from Bedford, I was told that I should look into a trade school because college wasn't for me. I actually graduated with I call it a 2-point low GPA. It wasn't above a 2.5, but it was a very low GPA, and it kind of set me back. And it wasn't until I got to meet some of my great mentors in my life, like Beth Sump, Charles Webb, Dr. Mushler, some of these other people that really helped me out and gave me a chance. And the reason I say that is because no one in this room is coming from any different background. There's no competitive advantage to come from somewhere separate if you're wherever you're at. Where I'm at now came from just hard work and people giving me a shot. And that's why Beth and I are here today to give back and help you guys out. So 5 life lessons to live by. This was like an article in the Plain Dealer they did on me. 1, you guys can write these down if you want. The first one I say is live by integrity. Someone once said it takes a lifetime to build integrity, but only a moment to destroy it. So just do what you say and practice what you preach. Treat other people the way you want to be treated. 2, I don't have these in front of me, but 2, I would say is, I hope I get to 5. If I don't, just ask me after. But 2, I would say is what my undergrad professor in entrepreneurship said, the best quote I still live by. He said, you're the average of your 5 closest friends. So the people you hang out with, they influence you, they impact you, and you're going to end up like them. Dr. Earls even took it to the next level. He said, if you hang around 4 broke people, you're bound to be the 5th. So kind of fix your circle around what you want to be, who you want to be, and build positive, supportive people of what you're doing. Number 3, stay humble. Like, you never know what can happen. Like me, I still remain humble. I'm still the same kid that was born and raised in Cleveland no matter where I go. If I'm in Europe, if I'm in Japan, I'm still the same kid. I don't treat myself as holier than thou, better than anybody else. 4, I would say is get a mentor. Beth gave me the best exposure I've ever had in my life, and she gave me the chance, and that's why we're here giving back. If you can find people that do that, that take a chance, that reach out for you and really give back to you, the sky's the limit. Like, she's introduced me to Toby Cosgrove, CEO of the clinic, people who came in from Obama's cabinet. It was just the exposure I got that she gave to me, and that really helped me out. So make sure you get a mentor because they definitely will help you out through life. And 5, I don't remember. And that's it. I think Beth and I, yeah, carry your notes, memorize your stuff, and don't stay up till 2 a.m. before you got to do a presentation.